Hello, I'm Anna, the Yarn Randomizer, and it's April 5th. April 5th? Yes, yes. And this is episode 46 of the Yarn Randomizer. Now, it's been like 4 weeks or almost a month since the last time I did this, and I've got some things to catch up on and everything. So, if you couldn't figure it out, this is a knitting podcast, and I'm going to peek at my notes every so often. And I wanted to welcome folks who are just discovering this podcast, and welcome back folks who are watching regularly. Thanks to have you back and everything. Let's see, you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry and just about, email and everything as the Yarn Randomizer. For Gmail, it's the Yarn Randomizer at gmail.com. I even have a P.O. box listed down in the notes down below. And then finally, why randomizer? Oh, see if I can do this. I pick yarns. Let's see if I can show this. Yes, randomly from my stash using these numbered chips that correspond to a spreadsheet that I have. And that's how I pick my projects. Now, let's see. So I think the final thing is please like and subscribe, and it helps other people find the podcast. And after that, let's just get right down to it. Up front, I always like to let folks know if they were the winner. So I think last time I had talked about giving away some leftover yarn I had. This is Madeline Tosh Farm Twist, and it was a whole skein and a good chunk of a skein. I had made a hat, the oh my gosh, Oslo hat. I think the Oslo hat, and with it, and it had turned out really nice. But I thought I would just give away the rest of this yarn. Now, the name that came up randomly picked was DNORDFORS 5845. I'll put that on screen and stuff. So if that's you, please send me an email via my Gmail address, and we'll figure out how to get this to you. It is beautiful yarn. Now, I wanted to mention that the person who won last episode hasn't gotten in touch with me yet. And that was God Stolen there, who had made the comment. And so this is the Laughs More, Worry Less colorway from Hypnotic Yarn in their DK weight. So there's that. And so, yes, there will be another giveaway, which we'll talk about in stash management. So otherwise, we're just going to go straight ahead with everything else. Now, the sweater I'm wearing, and I really should have worn this sweater more since I made it, but this is the Sea Sweater by Yuko Shimizu. So it's a really neat sweater, and so it's just got this kind of broken rib on it. It's got these ribbed sleeves, and it's got the neatest construction. You can see from the shoulder down, it's got this straight line here, and you're doing short rows the whole time to kind of build this shoulder out. Same thing on both sides. And then once you pick up the sleeves, you do short rows to fill that in. So you don't have the traditional drop sleeve. You see how that's kind of shaped more? And so it ends up coming across really nice. Now, the funny thing is, this yarn is Peyton's capstan yarn, which you've probably never heard of. And so this was yarn I actually bought when I lived back in Wales in the early 80s. So it was at least 35 years old, maybe closer to 40 years old when I actually pulled it up got picked by the randomizer, and I had to make a sweater out of it. Now, the real trick with this, I finished this in March of 2022. Yeah. And the problem was, I had a bunch of this capstan in these two colors that go together really nicely, because you see there's brown flecks in this kind of oatmeal color to go with the brown. But I had based the yardage on what the estimate was on Ravelry. Now, the trick is that the Ravelry estimate for the yardage, there were two weights of capstan. One was worsted and one was Aran. This was the Aran weight, and there was definitely less yardage than specified by Ravelry of the Aran weight per ball. And so I ran out. I didn't have enough to finish the sweater. And so I had to go through and find another yarn in my stash, and that's how I finished the ribbing on the bottom here, you can see. So that was how I ended up finishing it off. And I still think it turned out pretty well. I kind of color blocked it based on the colors I had. I did these pearls so that you get that pearl bump down in the other section, so you had a nice blend of the colors and everything. But I really like the construction of the pattern. It was really well thought out, and just was neat to pick up the sleeve and have it build out that way. So instead of your standard drop shoulder, it actually kind of angled down instead. And so it was a real nice result. So that's the Sea Sweater by Yuko Shimizu. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but you can see in the notes, I'll link to my project and you can find the pattern there. Oops, pick up the computer. Now, let's see. So that's what I'm wearing. Next is finished objects, which there are none. So it's been a month and I have no finished objects. And so we'll see. We'll look at the works in progress. My attention was fairly divided while we were on vacation, but I did get a lot of progress on some things. So some things are close, but not quite there. So no finished objects this episode. All right. So the ones I want to go through that I made some progress on, and now you get to be, let's see, I'm going to unpack these from their bags, and they may have been, so in some cases, partway through the trip, I actually mailed some stuff back here to the US in order to lighten our load a little bit, because I had definitely brought too much stuff. But so as I unpack these, we'll see what else comes out of the bag. But for anybody who doesn't know, I have this pegboard here that I like to use to keep my works in progress on. So let's start with the Felix. Whoop, I can get this off of here. There we go. So this is the Felix Cardigan by Amy Christopher. And so let's see. Last time we were here, I had finished the body and I had done the bands for the button bands and the collar, and I was down to doing the sleeves. Now I really wanted to sew on those buttons, but that'll wait until next time. But I made some really good progress on the sleeve. So let's see. Yeah, and I picked up the stitches for the other sleeve. Okay. Oops, you're going to hear things falling down here, I think. What is going on? Okay. Well, we'll keep this straight. So there is the sweater. It's going to look a little wonky there because I don't have those buttons sewn down yet. And and I've got cords doing all kinds of crazy things here. All right. Yes, I see. Oh, I see what's going on. So I'll set that cord aside. Let me bring this one back together. What happened was I got a good chunk of the way through one sleeve and I got a little nervous. I had divided the yarn in half, but then when I got to where I did on the sleeve, I was a little concerned that I didn't want to go to the very end of the sleeve. So I actually got pretty far with the sleeve, so you can see it there. And so it's really, and I think, yep, I have a whole bunch of stitches off the needle. But whatever the case, I have the sleeve got it that far, and I have to figure out if I want to switch to ribbing yet. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to pick up the other sleeve and knit it down to the same point and keep working on making sure I make them even. But basically, I will have this sweater finished for next episode. So I plan to focus on this and get it done. So this sweater is made with, it's a yarn called Resistance from Lorna's Laces. It was a DK weight that I feel like is more like a sport weight. And it's in scarlet. And then the other yarn I'm holding with it is, Drops? Yeah, it's a Drops yarn, brushed alpaca. And so it's in a red. And it's interesting because I think one red is a kind of a more orangey red, one's a more purpley red, and it ends up producing a nice color there, I think. And so this is going to be a really beautiful, very red sweater. So I need to set this down carefully, but I don't think there's much risk of those stitches becoming unraveled because this combination of yarn holds on to itself pretty well. So we'll set that down, and I'm going to try to be wearing that next time. So Now the next thing I was working on was, you haven't seen this one for a while, but I got out my Satama Shawl by Vali, and I made some progress on that. And so, figure out which the right side is. Yes, this one here. And so I continued with so this shawl, this is holding it kind of upside down. Here's the top of it. There was some garter in the gray, and then a 2-color brioche with this colorful yarn in the gray, then some more garter, and then single color brioche with the more colorful yarn. And so I'm a chunk of the way through that. I think I just have 8 rows to go on that before switching back to the 2-color brioche again. And so I made some progress on this while on vacation, but I also made a discovery. Let's see if I can find a spot to show you. You want to look at the right side. So if you see how the increases happen here, let's see if I can show them coming out of the side here on the brioche. It turns out the way you do that increase on this brioche is you do a brioche knit, and then you yarn over, and then you do another brioche knit. That leads you with 2 new brioche stitches leading off, and one from the opposite side coming out of the back with the yarn over. Now, I found out that sometimes when I came back and I was working those stitches to continue with the pattern, sometimes the yarn over would get twisted around with one of the brioche knits in that stitch. And that ended up producing a different kind of look at the edge, which I was not crazy about. And so I probably don't have one to show you now. No, but I did pick it down and fix it, which sounds like crazy stuff with the brioche. But I want to go back and make sure, because I kind of did this as well as I could while I was on vacation, but I decided to set it down for a bit until I could kind of pin it down to a mat and really make sure all the thread, kind of all the strands of yarn were going where they were supposed to. And you know, it's something nobody would ever notice with this, but it's a me thing. I want to go back and make sure I've got those right, but otherwise it's coming out beautifully. So I'll have another 2-color brioche section with the dominant color being the gray, and then ending with a garter section with the gray. And so this has been a really nice knit, and it's so, I can't even describe how soft and squishy this is ending up. The yarns I'm using are, let's see, Madeline Tosh Merino Light is the gray, and then some Hedgehog Fibres Skinny Singles that are the other yarn in here. And so it's a nice brioche project. The only fancy thing it's got is those increases, but that's the only challenging thing going on there. But yeah, really enjoying this and would love to get this done and get a chance to wear it. All right, so that is the Satama Shawl by Vali. Now, next, yes, the year-long blanket project. So I have make sure I don't spill my drink here. I have my year-long blanket, and it is current. I kept it going the whole time I was on vacation. And pardon me, you'll have to excuse me because I'm still recovering from a cold from the vacation. But let's see how well I can show this. I added a second 50-inch cord to this. Ta-da! So it's really grown a lot, I think, since the last time I showed it. It's actually up to 25% complete. I've got this, I think they called, was it dots and, dots and slip stitch petals was what they called this last section. And now I've started on to it is the dip stitch. So I'm going to do 6, it's going to be 6 rows of this color and then start with the dip stitch pattern. But yeah, it really came out very nice. I'm really happy with how the colors are working together and how this is coming out. And so this continues for the rest of the year. This dip stitch section will continue all the way into early June until it's complete. So that's going to take the next, was it a May? Yeah, a couple, almost 2 months to complete that this next section on the blanket. But it's the Bubbly Blossoms blanket by Stephen West. And so yeah, really turning out nice. This slip stitch section was really cool how it turned out. All right, so that's where that is. Oh, and it's finished knits. They have the Lankava yarn, the DK that I'm using for this. And so I get it from there because this blanket, like my blanket last year, takes 16 skeins of DK weight yarn in 100 gram skeins, and that's a lot of yarn. And so I pick up the Lankava Mayaneo, if that's how to pronounce it, because it's more budget friendly compared to like hand-dyed DK skeins and stuff. So that's where I'm at with that. Now, let's see, set this aside. Now, what's next? The fatigue cap. So the thing I did a lot of work on, and it's really very close to being done, is my fatigue cap for my husband. I am making it out of some companion fiber fingering that my husband picked up for me on one of his motorcycle trips. And it's a dead simple pattern. You simply knit. Oh goodness, yeah. Let's do that. You knit a 36-inch tube, 36-inch long tube, and you just take the two ends, and I'm very close. I'm over 30 inches at this point, and I'll explain why I kind of took a break on it. But you basically just knit this 36-inch tube, and then you finish the two ends flat. And so then you can wear it as a short scarf, like one wrap around the neck, kind of tucked in, or you can tuck it into itself, similar to the musselburgh, and you can have a folded up like 4 layers of hat around your head with this. So I got a couple things going on here. So first is, when I first cast this on, I cast on too many stitches. I think I started with, it was like 107, may have been 170 stitches, because I was taking a guess at my gauge and thinking about my husband. His head is like 23.5 inches around. And so I wanted to make sure I had the right amount of negative ease. I have made him a hat that ended up, a musselburgh, that ended up being too large. And so I didn't want to oversize it. Well, when I started knitting it, it was clear that I had made the same mistake again. It was too large. And so what I did was I didn't feel like, pardon me, I started it, this is not what it calls for, but I started it with a provisional cast on so that I could each end of this the same way. And so I didn't feel like doing another provisional cast on of 142 stitches because I took away 28. So I just dropped those 28 stitches off the needle and then continued to knit. So as a result, I've got this little leftover bit here and a little untidiness around where I continued. And so the plan is, I'm going to take a needle and get it back in here and then unravel this upper part, and then I'm going to finish it that way. Now I know when I do that, it's going to end up being a little bit longer than what it started with. It's probably about 1.5 inches or close to 2 inches. So I know it will end up longer on less stitches. And so I wanted to go ahead, now that I'm close to finishing this, I wanted to finish the knitting on this end, bind it off however I'm going to bind it off, and then once I get that measure, know how much I have to do at this other end. Now the next question, so that I am going to record doing that as well. So that'll be fun. You can watch me kind of get the needle in there, unravel it, and then start working it back and finishing it, so you can see how to go about something like that. I don't know if this will ever come up as something somebody needs to do, but at least it'll be a nice example. Now the next question is, how do I want to bind off these ends flat? So originally I did the provisional thinking that maybe I would Kitchener the two ends together, not the two ends, the two sides together bringing this together flat. But I'm not absolutely certain about that now. So the other choice is, I think what they call for in the pattern, although maybe they don't even say that, I think they just say to sew the end down. You cast it off and sew it. So I guess technically you could do that, just do a regular bind off and sew it down. But I also thought you could do a 3-needle bind off to pull those ends together, and that would give you a pronounced kind of edge, because the 3-needle bind off basically seals the 2 layers of the fabric together through them, kind of so that you get that little double end on one side of that cast off. Now the other option would be what I have a video for on the emotional support chicken tail, how to combine those ends. That is where you do a 3-needle bind off, but you knit through the first stitch, but you purl through the back stitch, and you keep the yarn between the layers. And what you get by doing that process is you get the 3-needle bind off where the 2 edges lay over each other instead, and you get what looks like a chain on the top. I'll link the tutorial I have for doing that for the tail down below. And so I've got to decide which one I want to do. I don't know if you guys have any opinions on that, on how I should finish this off. But I'm going to use one of those methods: Kitchener, regular 3-needle bind off, or the special 3-needle bind off where you get the 2 layers overlapping this way with a chain on the top. So we'll see. Let's see. I have to maybe even try it out, like a section of it, and see how it looks and everything, but we'll see. But I'm really happy with how this has come out. And the interesting thing was, at some point I had to join in the new ball of yarn, and I had to try to keep some continuity with the pooling. And if you look, I think I did a pretty good job. It's hard to tell where that next ball of yarn comes in, so I'm pretty happy with that. So the 2 skeins had very similar spacing of the colors, and so I was able to just kind of bring it in there. There's a slight shift, I think, but it ended up looking pretty decent, I think. So yeah, so that is the simplest, and the great thing about this is, talk about mindless knitting. You just go and go and go on this. It was great train knitting, you know, sitting and talking with folks knitting, just whatever. Didn't require much in the way of thinking to do it. You just could keep going at it and at it. So super happy with how that's coming out. And I think this I will have done before next time as well. And so I'll get a nice picture of my husband wearing this. Let's see, make sure I don't bind this up somewhere. Okay, so that is the fatigue cap. That was a World War II pattern that I've been doing. And then, let's see, finally, the Beldour socks. I think I had a start on those last time, but I made progress. I finished the foot. Oh, and I want to use let me get this sock blocker out so I can show you. And as I was making this, I think at the point that I made this, I had less experience when I made this pattern previously. I had less experience with socks. And so it's been interesting going through it again, kind of knowing what I know now. So let's see if I can do a decent job showing this. Get these out there. Okay. All right, so there it is. And so it's got this great, let's see if I can show that well, a great slip stitch pattern here with pearls in it as well, that does a good job kind of breaking up. It kind of prevents pooling to some extent. So you get this great texture across the front. And so that'll be on the entirety of the leg going further. Now the interesting thing is how she does the gusset. So the sock definitely has a gusset, and so it increases here through here, but the way she does that gusset is she starts increases at the center of the sole and doing these very subtle kind of lifted increases to make this wedge of material leading up the heel. Now at that point, you know, the question was, how long should I make this foot in order for it to fit me properly? Well, the great thing about this pattern, this is Beldour by Natalia Vasileva, and it has got details in there about how to estimate how long to make the foot in order to get the length you want when you do the heel, when you actually construct the heel. And so it was great because all I had to do was measure the length of 30 stitches here on the main part of the foot to figure out how much space length that would give me, and know that when I did the gusset, that's how much additional length I would get after the gusset, and then another ½ inch for the heel turn. And so I was able to size these perfectly based on the information that she had in the pattern. A lot of times I'll do the same thing myself, calculate it out by hand, figure how many stitches are in the gusset and in the heel turn. But in this case, in the pattern, she already details all that out for you, which is great. And so the other interesting thing is, and I think it may be hard to see, so you see the increases happen along here so you get this wedge of material here. Then you get this heel turn, but this looks sort of like a Flegel heel, but it's a little different. And so what she does is she has short rows that are going back and forth here, but her decreases, instead of being right with the short rows, are actually done in a, make that back up, in a decreasing wedge again. So it's almost like you have this hammock for your heel here. And these short rows here are just a matter of bringing this back up here, kind of working this additional cloth up here while you decrease these extra stitches. And so it's a unique kind of Flegel looking heel, but different from the standard. And just to show you, give you an example, on a traditional Flegel heel, and this is a great example. This is Wendy Johnson's Van Dyke socks, and they're a pattern that you use a worsted weight yarn on small needles to create very thick, sturdy socks. And I love this pattern. Now, and I'll put all that information below. So you can see here where their increases are for the gusset. I prefer working toe up. So you come here, increase for the gusset stitches, and then what happens here is you start doing short rows, and you use those short row, at the point at which you do short rows, there's actual decreases here. And if you look close enough, you can see at each end you're decreasing as you come up here. So you consume the extra gusset stitches right at the short row, at each end of the short row. Well, that's where this one differs. You have the short rows and you can see them. They're right there as they work along, but the decreases are here. And that's a little hard to see on this variegated yarn. But if you're interested in different heels, I highly recommend the pattern. She has a cuff down version of the sock as well as a toe up version. The sock, as done in the pattern, has an umbrella toe instead of a regular toe, and so that's a nice thing to try. But yeah, she's got some interesting things going on to learn in that pattern, so I highly recommend it. And it makes a beautiful sock. So that is progressing well. So I'm a quarter of the way done there. I won't promise to have those done next time. So those are all the works in progress. Now, let's see. My supposed daily task of finishing ends, I have been completely negligent. I did finish some ends on vacation, but I've really got to finish this shawl. This is the Trellis Shawl, and let me show you what I'm facing is all of that. Sometimes there are color changes on each row, and so the complication is that there is an eyelet along the edge, and so when you have to weave in these ends, your only path into the main body of the shawl is through these single like twined strands between each eyelet. And I would say my feedback would be to dispense with the eyelets if you did this, and so that you could just go directly into the fabric without having to weave through just a little twisted strand in order to make weaving these ends easier. It's a beautiful shawl. I can't wait to block it and get this all done and have it ready to wear, but it's definitely not fun. It's annoying to weave in the ends on this. Everything else about it was great. Weaving the ends is no fun. So that's where it's at right now. And but I keep wanting to say I'm going to finish this for April, but it's kind of like, I'm going to do as much as I can. I will make progress before the next episode. No other promises than that. All right, now let's see. So I went to the Knit and Ramble in Cornwall, and that was absolutely beautiful. Anton and of the Raw Wool Company and Jonathan of Jonathan's Days did an amazing job. It was a fantastic setting. It was a very small group of people, not a large group. Just I can't remember what the total number of other folks was, but it couldn't have been much more than 10 folks who were there for the retreat and everything. And the setting was beautiful, the Bosfield house, and the hikes were really nice. And it was great to go see the farm and the sheep. And we did a hike through the countryside then and ate at a local pub and everything. And it was really beautiful. I really highly recommend it. It's the Knit and Ramble. When they have another one, if you get a chance, you really should attend. And I would definitely like to go again. And they did a whole bunch of neat little courses, little kind of demonstrations and things like that as part of little exercises as far as thinking about knitting and that kind of stuff as part of the Knit and Ramble. And so it was just beautiful. The place was really amazing. I'll put some pictures at the end, but I think I'll stick in a picture of the toilet in one of the common bathrooms. It was pretty funny. So fancy. But one of the things that was really nice, it had been 41 years, I think, since I'd been to Great Britain. And it was really neat to experience drive. I didn't drive and my husband didn't drive, but we rode with folks. And it just reminded me so much of when I lived in Wales before, the kind of narrow roads, the people parking along the edges, and the way you have, people would signal to each other to be able to make it through, because in some cases it's effectively one lane in some areas, and really so fun to see that again. So that was really fun. It was really beautiful. And again, I'll put a little montage of pictures at the end for you to see. But we also visited, before we got there, we visited a motorcycle museum in, was it New Milton in the UK? And then we went to Portsmouth afterwards and went to the Naval Museum there. We also went to the Imperial War Museum in London before we went down to New Milton. And then we took a ferry across the channel, which was a lot of fun and long. It's like a 7-hour ride across the channel. And then we stayed in Caen, I think that's the right way to pronounce it, France, and visited the beaches of Utah and Omaha beaches, and a couple of different special kind of grave memorial sites, and some other place where they had the German emplacements were up above up at the top of the cliffs and everything. And that was really sobering to see, but also kind of beautiful at the same time. And then we went to Paris and spent a couple of days in Paris, and that we went to see. I had been to Paris before and visited all the places kind of we went while we were there together, but Heinz hadn't seen any of that stuff. And so we went to see the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe and Notre Dame and a couple other places there. And I really enjoyed taking the metro, the tube up in London and the metro down there. But this was Heinz's first experience with taking subways, and he was not a fan. But I would go everywhere on a subway if I lived in a place like Paris. I absolutely love it. And so it was a blast. And so, again, I'll put some pictures at the end, but I definitely recommend the Knit and Ramble. It was really wonderful. And it's so great in Great Britain and in like France and I think most of Europe to be able to get so many places you can get by train so easily. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. So what that means, let's see. Oh, we will get to acquisitions. I'll talk more about that in a bit. But we have some other things to talk about, and that is my next randomizer pick. So I've been away for a month. Should have had 2 picks at least, but I decided to include 3 picks with this episode because I'm just so excited about some of these picks. Okay, so first, I wanted to talk about the pick from last time, and it was Knit Picks Capra DK in this Loganberry, this purple, this heather. And so what I wanted to show off, it's still, I'm not casting it on until I finish 2 my sweaters that I have in progress right now, not counting my husband's sweater, but my sweaters. But I wanted to show, I had worked up a gauge swatch. I think, last time, and it's just so neat. Well, I washed and blocked this, and I checked the gauge, and it's not quite there. This was on a size 7. So I ended up going up to a size 8 needle, and there is the new swatch, and that hits gauge very well. But just so you can see, this is the difference you get. You can see the difference. Again, it's not incredibly obvious, but this one is definitely going to fit the gauge and produce the size sweater I expect. And it's really, so I'm not going to lecture you about doing swatches, but for me, it's like worthwhile in order to see the difference on what's going to get the size sweater that I'm trying to go for. So I wanted to update on that. So I got a couple of swatches there, and those turned out so nice. Yeah, really neat pattern. And so those will be for the willow, I think the willow sweater. Yeah, willow pullover. And so that's all set to go now. I know what size needles to use, and so that is good to go. Now, that was number 6 for the year. So now pick number 7, drum roll. And so if you've watched the shorts, of course, you already know this, but this is the fiber seed sprout DK in city streetlights. And so there's a whole bunch of different colors in there, kind of speckled around. And I was thinking about making a Tulsa tee. I thought this might work really nice for the Tulsa tee. So I went and did a gauge swatch, and I wanted to show you this. Let's see this way. So here is my gauge swatch, and look at that. How nice that come out. Now, this is an in the round gauge swatch, and there's no cutting of yarn. You can see there's no strands across the back. But it's using the method. I have a video, and other folks have videos on how to do this too, of how to make an in the round swatch. And so you end up having strands hanging off one side as you do this technique. But basically, you knit across, slide the stitches back, and when you pull the long loop, like you would normally do for an in the round swatch, instead of working with the live yarn, you work with the loop. And so you make it long enough so you can finish the row, then you come back again and work with the live yarn again. And that makes the loops all get stuck on one edge, so they won't interfere with blocking the swatch and everything, and you can get the in the round gauge that you're interested in. So what happened was I did this in the round gauge swatch, and I got 18 stitches to 4 inches. Now, the Tulsa tee calls for 17 stitches to 4 inches, and I looked at the sizing, and I looked at the amount of yarn that was required, and I was really concerned that if I tried to make a Tulsa tee out of this, I would be kind of squeezed for yarn. I wouldn't necessarily have enough yarn. And although I don't I typically like about 13 inches on the side, kind of down to kind of my hip, is the way I like sweaters to fit. But even so, I was worried it would end up being more crop than I wanted, or have shorter sleeves than I wanted, and everything. And so what I did, and again, I should make a video about this, I know, is I looked for all the patterns that had 18 stitches to 4 inches in Ravelry. And I looked through that listing, and I didn't restrict it by weight of yarn. I just looked at what was there. I did restrict it to one strand, so it was only using one strand. And so I looked at a bunch of those patterns that had 18 stitches to 4 inches, and made sure it was on stockinette, because I've done my gauge swatch on stockinette. And I did find a pattern that I think will work out really well. And that is, let's find it here. It is the Avenue Vest by Tori Yu. Same person who does the Manhattan hat. So I'll put in a picture of that. And so I think the plain stockinette stitch will really do a nice job of displaying this yarn nicely. And so it'll be a nice knit. And so I know what size needle to use to get this gauge, and this is a block swatch, so I'm good there. And so I'm also, you think this whole episode is about advertising doing test swatches. but it's not, it's just what I, what I ended up doing. But yeah, so I think this will be great for that vest. That'll create a really nice little vest. I'm trying to decide if I do the round collar or the V. I think it has both in there. But yeah, so that's my plan, is this, with this yarn. So that's randomizer project number 7 for this year, for 2025, will be the Avenue Vest by Tori Yu. So there's that one. Now, yarn pick number 8 for 2025 is this hypnotic yarn, and this is their, it's interesting, on here it's called their fluff, but on their list of yarns in Ravelry it's called something else, whisper mohair. I imagine it's basically the same thing, because the percentages of the mohair and silk are the same between those two, but just in case you're looking for it, I think on the Hypnotic Yarn website they call it fluff. So this is 2 skeins of the fluff, and this is in the color A la Florentine. And so basically I have got, is it about 918, is that right? 918 yards, yes, 918 yards of this. So now this will depend on how long you've been watching this. You may recognize this. And so I bought this yarn specifically to go with a yarn my husband picked up for me on one of his motorcycle trips, and this was in 2023. He picked up a yarn for me from the Maggie Valley yarn shop in Maggie Valley, North Carolina. And that yarn was this hand-dyed Diva, and it's their, I can't remember what they call it, homegrown sock. There it is. Okay. And it's got this cute label with a little rhinestone on there. And this colorway is, I think, Swift. Yeah, Swift is the name of this colorway. So he picked up his rule. The rule I give him for if he's going to buy me yarn somewhere is to buy 2 skeins. Always buy 2 skeins. So he got me 2 skeins of this homegrown sock in Swift. And so I picked up, I think those will go together, this fluff from Hypnotic Yarn to go with it. So the 8th randomizer project for this year is these 2 combined together. Now, I had originally thought about making a ranunculus with this, but when I was at the Knit and Ramble, somebody was wearing their love note, and I've decided I will make a love note out of this yarn combination and see how that turns out. So that's the next one. So that's number 8 for this year. A lot of my randomizers hitting me with sweater quantities here, and we'll see how this turns out. But I definitely expect to be able to get to these 2 sweaters. Now, pardon me. The next one is randomizer pick number 9 for 2025, and that is this Madeline Tosh Prairie yarn, which is a lace weight single ply yarn, and this is in the color Abiquiu. Now, I love this because Abiquiu is where Ghost Ranch is in New Mexico, and I love the turquoises and the browns in here with this kind of light, off-white background. Just a beautiful colorway. So this lace weight single ply, it's 1,680 yards of this. Now, see, what I wanted to talk about was I really would like to make a garment with this. So it's tricky. So, I searched through lace patterns for garments on Ravelry, and, I found some interesting possibilities. Let's see. I'll put in like 1 or 2 pictures there, but really, I wasn't 100% certain about what I wanted to do with this, and the pattern, nothing really clicked for me. And then I realized as I started looking at the stitches per 4 inches and looking for patterns that had a certain number of stitches per 4 inches, like 28, maybe 30 and stuff, and started looking at those patterns. And I realized that, let's see if I have it with me here. Yeah, the Sunday Tee by Petite Knit, which I think uses a light fingering, has the 28 stitches per 4 inches for that tea that, and I thought that would look really great in this yarn. Another one is a new pattern by Kit, I think Kit Couture, called, and I can't even pronounce it, Lasso t-shirt, and I'll put in a picture of that too. That also is 28 stitches to 4 inches. So the possibility is maybe I could get a nice like t-shirt size pullover using lace weight yarn on some small needles, some seriously small needles, maybe size 3 needles, maybe 2.5. Does that sound insane? Knitting a sweater in stockinette using lace weight single ply. So I'm up for it. So really, the next thing I need to do to figure this out, what I really want to do with this yarn, is knit a gauge swatch. So I think I will take some, and I should have gotten it out. I have something I've knitted out of prairie already, a cowl, and I may get that out and take a look at that as well. Not to knit the cowl, but to get a feel for what was the needle size and how did those stitches come out. So the real thing is that will help me decide what to do with this yarn is to knit a gauge swatch and block it and see what I like as far as number of stitches to the inch there. But man, such a gorgeous color. I love it. So that's pick number 9 for this year. So my randomizer has been doing some weird stuff, so picking more sweater quantities for me. And I actually know the next 3 picks, and so we're going to be going a different direction the next time we talk about the next random pick, and so that'll be fun too. But it'll be a little more. So the next 3 will not be sweater quantities, just so you know. All right, so that is that. Now, oh my goodness, so are you ready for an acquisition parade here? That's what we're down to. And so I will try to go through these not too fast. And what I've done is I put them all in my, I don't talk a whole lot about bags on here, but this is my Gussie, what's it called? My Gussie bag from Thread Company. You can barely kind of see that there. And so this is a great bag. I actually use this on vacation, and I use it as my carry-on on the flight to put underneath the seat in front of me and that kind of stuff. So it was great for knitting out of while I was on vacation. My only thing is I need to have something where I can wear it over my shoulder, maybe somehow put an extra, something that could clip a longer band in. But otherwise, I love this bag. It's been through a lot. All right, so now, so the first acquisitions I picked up on vacation was my husband and I went to the Sammy Miller Motorcycle Museum in New Milton down in the UK. And as fate would have it, in the same place where this big museum is, there's a place to eat and a couple little shops. One of those shops was a yarn shop. And so it was called Seahorse Yarn and Crafts there in New Milton. And of course, I couldn't skip the opportunity to check it out. And so these are a little better a little worse for wear from getting back home. But I picked up, they had a lot of King Cole yarn there. And so I picked up some King Cole. This is the Norse 4-ply. And so it's 75% superwash wool and 25% polyamide, 460 yards or 420 meters. And so I liked those gray colors for the like cloudy days and stuff. And so it's like a little bit of a self-striping, self-patterning for a pair of socks. And so I like that color and picked that up because I've never had any King Cole yarn before. And so I picked that up. Next, I looked for a hand dyer yarn in the same shop. And what I found was Kozy Kitchen Fibres. And this is their superwash merino nylon. Again, it's a 75-25 blend, about 464 yards. And this colorway is Autumn Berries. And so I thought that was a really neat colorway. I see a mail come up on my phone there. But yeah, I thought that turned out really nice. Now, So those were the two I picked up at Seahorse Yarn and Crafts, which was a really fun visit. It was really fun talking with the ladies there and everything, and showing off a bunch of my knits that I had with me. So next is when I went for the knit Ramble, there was a really nice little swag bag, and this, to me, this bag feels like linen. And so a nice little just simple drawstring bag that had our swag in it. And that's going to fall down. All right. And so in there were two skeins of full skeins of DK. That up there of the Raw Wool Company. And so one is On a Dark and Stormy Night of Wensleydale Long Wool. That one. And then the other one is Mevagizzy Mizzle. There's the colorway, and it's made of Blueface Leicester, Romney, and Wensleydale. And so I think those two colors will work well together. So two full skeins of their DK. And then there was one skein of a sport weight yarn and 100% Wensleydale lamb's wool. And this is 120 yards here in this skein. I think it's 50 grams, a half size. And I actually picked up 5 more to go with this, so that I have 720 yards of some sport yarn, which I think I will definitely use for a ranunculus, I believe, just by itself. Similar, I've made a ranunculus out of sport weight before, and it turned out great. And so I think this will make a really good, kind of very kind of wearable neutral color vest out of the ranunculus to wear with things. So I've got 6 skeins of this, but it came with one in the swag bag. And then let's see, 2 more little, a mini of some more DK in the, the colorway was Shepherd Silver there. And then another mini of some Le Garçon yarn in the Jonathan's, is it Jonathan's, look at the way, oh, where is that at? Ah, there it is. Jonathan's Soft Days. And so that's in that color, which matches his eyes. And so we got a mini in that. And then, let's see, out there, before I go to the rest of the yarn that I got, I was going to show, we got a gauge tool, which is really nice. It has the Raw Wool Company there on the bottom. A very cool pencil and notebook, and I've been looking everywhere for the notebook. I think I left it at work, with this really amazing pencil from the Blackwing pencil. And so half the pressure, twice the speed. And so it's got this really neat replaceable eraser. And it has, my husband is taking quite a liking to this pencil. And then also a shawl flip, or you can't even remember what you call these things, but a really nice hide and hammer shawl clip or band. You can see the hide and hammer logo there. So yeah, I didn't have the notebook to show you, but that was everything that came in the swag bag, and all the yarn that, also the additional yarn was the sport that I picked up. And we got this book that just has some, we got a started project, and we we're going to work through doing the gussets on a miniature sweater for a Gansey and stuff. And so I have to pick that up and continue it, but I will show that off maybe next time. So I got to find out what the yarn was. I forgot to ask about that. But there's amazing pictures in this book of classic Ganseys there. And so a nice resource book. And so the idea was to design our own pattern, Gansey pattern, for the yoke. And so I still have to do that. I've got some graph paper to do that on. But yeah, so that was one of the little workshops that had while we were there. And then, okay, now next was the yarn I picked up in France. And so in Caen, I found the Happy Wool shop was not far away from the hotel we were at. And, my favorite phrase in France was going up to people, that I had to interact with and saying, Je ne parle pas français. Because I used to know more French, but with the amount of German practice, I kept coming up with the German words and not the French words for things that I needed to say. And so I was definitely not really didn't have the skill I should have to try to initiate communication. So I ended up using that a lot, but it helped to kind of get past that. But in some cases, you're just trying to, so a lot of the folks that I ended up interacting with didn't speak English, but I was still able to make a purchase anyway. So I picked up, this place specialized in Beldour yarn, and so I picked up a couple of their mohair, SOIE, so mohair silk probably is what that means. And so I picked this up because I have some leftover silk mohair scrappy situation, and I was thinking that this might be able to augment that. So that's what I picked that up for. It feels very nice stuff. So I picked that up there at Happy Wool in Caen. And then in Paris, I had a recommendation to check out, I'm trying to remember the name of the shop, Little Weasel. And so I stopped. Oh, we got a noisy vehicle going by here. Okay. All right. So I stopped at Little Weasel and I picked up some yarn there. Now, some of this yarn I could probably get in the US, but it was kind of fun picking it out there. But there's one that definitely was born and bred France. So we'll go through these, and the last one I'll save is from France in particular. So I picked up 2 skeins of Knitting for Olive, their silk mohair, the soft silk mohair, and this, wake up computer, this is their colorway Hokkaido. I loved this orange. Now I'll show you why I picked out this orange. All right, so I'll set that aside for a second. So the next one I picked up was La Bien Amie. Now, is this practically glowing through the screen? This is an amazing color, isn't it? And so this they had there, and this colorway is Tang. And I was thinking of combining this orange and this colorway Tang, and they match a little better than it might seem. There's a bunch of orange in this Tang, which is appropriate. But I absolutely love this colorway and had to have it. So I figure I'll do some kind of hat where I do a fingering and a mohair together or something along those lines, maybe a cowl or something, but just could not resist this colorway. All right. So finally, I'm looking, I see that we're almost up to an hour. Okay, finally, this is born and bred in France, and this is V. Lanes. If that's how to say it, you can see her label. And so this is dyed somewhere there in France. And I really love this tan background with all these different color pops. And it's got the cutest name for a colorway. So in French, oh boy, cambrioler la pâtisserie, but basically robbing the bakery. So I love it. And so it's just a nice sock wet yarn that'll make a great pair of socks someday. So beautiful. And yeah, it's a 75-25 split as well. So that was all the yarn acquisitions. Now, while I was gone, I got my surprise box from Twice Sheared Sheep. And so let me go over that really quick. And so I got the Sheepyshire yarn. Oh yeah, spoilers. You should have opened yours I think you'd have yours by now, but spoilers if you haven't. So this is Sheepyshire staple sock. It's another 75-25, and this is in the colorway Skipper. So that's really pretty. And what's cool is I feel like some of the other stuff that came with this kind of matches this colorway. So the other things we got were a little bag that has a little bottom to it, but a nice zipper bag from there. Has an outside compartment. And so So that came in the box. Actually, I'll stick in a picture of the contents of the box there. But yeah, nice lined bag. Also, get these turned around properly. Some snag-free stitch markers. Really cute butterflies. And a moth-themed counting stitch marker. She's got a really good video about how to use these counting stitch markers to keep track of your rows. They're really neat. Nice little moth there, although I'm not a big fan of moths. I like moths in general, not clothes moths. And then a tape with a little cow on the outside, and a little storage box with a girl and a lamb. And then finally, a bunch of repair hooks, which I was really glad to get in different sizes. I had one similar to this at one point and lost it. So I love these little repair hooks with a point on one side and a crochet hook on the other. And then finally, kind of a little yarn caddy, or if you have something to carry this with, some folks, if you work with the yarn from the outside of the ball, these would be really useful. And so this one can also sit on the table and unwind. So it's really pretty. And you can take it, separate it, and then carry it on a wrist strap. That's an extra thing you can get, and take it along. There we go. Yeah, really neat. So I think, whew, that's it for acquisitions. Really quick. Wow, isn't there a giveaway I'm supposed to talk about? Yes, yeah, we've got stash management. So I finally did a calculation on how much yarn has come in and how much yarn's gone out. Now, if I double the yarn, the yards of the yarn that's come in, I've only used up, I'm not even close. I'm a quarter of the way compared to it. I've had about 20,000 yards come in. That really sounds awful so far this year, but I've used 5,000 yards already this year. Now, it wasn't 20,000 that came in, it was 10. So I've technically brought in twice as much yarn as I've used as far as yardage, but I double that, the incoming yarn, to pay more of a price on my using up yarn. And so I have the rest of the year to balance it out or get worse, one of the two. And if I don't balance it out at the end of the year, I will destash to compensate for the excess balance of the yarn, and that will benefit one of the folks who watch. So in order to work towards that balancing, here is a skein of yarn. Now this is from Lucky Violet Color Co. and some interesting colors on there. And the name of this colorway is this is Betty, the name of the yarn, and the colorway is Let the Wookiee Win. So I think it's supposed to be sort of like the, do you remember that board in the first, that little electronic game in the first Star Wars episode where Chewie was playing with Luke? And I think these colors are reminiscent of the colors of some of the pieces on the board. And so yeah, so if you are interested in this yarn, please comment about a Wookiee in your comment, and don't say anything about giveaways. That makes the scammers come out. And so just mention something funny about a Wookiee in your comment, and you will be eligible to win this in the next episode. So, whew, that was a lot. And so, let's see, we're just over an hour. And so I'm going to add some clips, little pictures from vacation you can watch at the end and everything. And of course, the last picture will be a picture of Odo, who spent the time with another family while we were gone, and he did great, so much better than putting him in a kennel. He was very well taken care of and very loved while we were gone. So yeah. So in other words, I hope we're having very wet weather here in Ohio. I'm looking out, and on the farm field across from us, I see Lake Etna out there now, covering most of the good chunk of the field. And we're experiencing some problems with wetness here in the house as well. But I'm hoping we'll get some sunshine soon. And I hope you're enjoying the weather wherever you are. I'm enjoying spring showing up outside. I imagine it's getting colder down in the southern hemisphere. But I hope you are experiencing kindness in your life and giving it in return. And I hope you're taking good care of yourself. And in the meantime, enjoy your knits.